This season for the Phoenix Suns has been a letdown. There's no debate there. No silver linings. The Suns are a team that never quite found its way. And as we stare down the offseason, one thing is certain. Like Sam Cooke sang back in 1964, a change gonna come. But what kind of change? There's no shortage of theories on how to fix this team or no lack of voices offering their solutions, right? Trade Durant, fire Bud, get draft picks, leave Beal on the tarmac in Atlanta. We all have different theories on how to fix this Phoenix Suns team. Now, I originally planned to hold off, to wait until the offseason to officially begin diving into what needs to be done. 6 games left or not, however, the season's over. Even if by some miracle the Suns sneak into the play-in, it's not going to change the inevitable Jamsters. This team is toast, and it's time to start buttering our bread. Why wait? Let's start fixing the Suns now. So that's what we're going to do on this edition of the Suns Jam Session podcast. A solo one by me, but one that I've put a lot of time and thought into. I mean, you watch the show. If you read my writing at Bright Side of the Sun, you know I've been resident. I've been putting off having these conversations because, again, we're going to have a month and a half, 2 months to talk about this stuff once the season's over. But the mood has hit me just right. So I'm going to bring up point and counterpoint, blowing it up, because that's what some people are talking about right now. Blow it up, trade Durant, trade Booker. So let's talk about it. What are the pros of doing that? What are the cons of doing that? What has history told us about doing that? Let's explore it on this edition of the Suns Jam Session podcast. So thank you for hanging out with me. This is why, if you are a YouTube follower, you put those notifications to on, because you never know when the mood hits me just right, and I just want to hop on here and talk a little Suns basketball with y'all. So thank you for joining me. If you happen to be joining me live on YouTube in the chat, give me some of your feedback along the way. We'll discuss this. If you're listening later, thank you for doing so as well. Subscribe, rate, review, all that fun stuff. Pop them if you got them. And let's get into the point counterpoint with myself of blowing it up.
Hey, you're listening to the Suns Jam Session podcast, shooting the shit about the Suns since 2019.
So this season's underwhelming finish has left frustration simmering at every level. The fan base is mad at everybody, at the players, at the coaching, at the front office, at the ownership. And frustration, like any emotion, has a way of making smart people look stupid and do stupid things. As the Suns approach this 2025 offseason, which is the most important offseason in the history of the franchise, just like every other offseason before it, the last thing they can afford to do is another short-sighted move. They've already made enough of those to get the team and this franchise in this mess. Emotion, specifically excitement, pushed them into the Kevin Durant trade in February of 2023. That same excitement led them to double down on Bradley Beal months later, gutting their future for a fleeting chance at dominance. And now, frustration is the driving force behind the growing belief that the best path forward is to blow it all up. Trade Durant, trade Booker. Kindly ask Bradley Beal to waive his no-trade clause. Tear it down, restock the draft cupboard, and bring back a collection of mid-tier talent. It's an option. But is it the right one? It's time to let logic enter the chat. So how do you fix the Suns? Well, there's a lot of different ways. And some proposals I'm going to agree with and others I won't. But the point is to examine every possibility and think critically about where each path might lead. That said, there's one idea I can shut down right now, blowing it up. I just don't agree with that approach. I adamantly reject it. But I'm still going to explore the other side of the coin because that's the fair way to do this. So let's talk about why I'm not a fan of blowing it up. The return on draft capital. So trading both Kevin Durant and Devin Booker would undoubtedly replenish the Suns' draft capital, giving them a fresh stockpile of picks for the future. And let's be clear, the Suns aren't completely devoid of draft assets. They have picks in the upcoming years. They just don't have the level of control you'd ideally want, right? They have the least favorable first-round pick between Cleveland and Minnesota this year, which is going to equate to the Cleveland pick. The least favorable between Denver and Philly in the second round. We don't have a pick next year in 2026, neither first or second. 2027, again, it's the least favorable between Cleveland and Minnie. 2028, we have a pick swap with Washington or Brooklyn, so we get the worst out of Washington, Brooklyn, or Phoenix in the first. Orlando to Phoenix if it ends in between picks 46 and 60 in the second. Least favorable of Cleveland and Minnie in 29. 2030 Memphis swap with Washington and no picks in 2031. So since the pick swaps are part of the game, they can't be traded until the designated draft year arrives. But the Suns do have draft picks to work with. They're going to have the opportunity to draft 2 new players in the upcoming 2025 NBA draft, or they can use those picks to create new opportunities for the team. So to believe they have no future whatsoever is simply incorrect. But I understand why people are like, dude, we need draft capital. Like, it doesn't feel like you have draft capital because you no longer can truly trade a ton of that draft capital. Now, a common misconception is that stockpiling draft assets guarantees a bright future. In reality, the chances of landing an all-NBA player through the draft are slim. The odds of drafting a franchise cornerstone are even lower. So if you're trading away Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, that's exactly what you're sacrificing. You're hoping that one day you'll find the level of talent in return, an all-NBA cornerstone. You're hoping that you get that in return. It's a risky bet, but one that could take years to pay off as well. Take a step back and look at the last 9 NBA drafts, right? Rewind to 2016. Remember that year? When the Suns were sitting on a mountain of draft capital and somehow ended up with Dragon Bender, Marquise Chris, and Tyler Ulis? Yikes. We missed on that one, huh? 4th pick, 8th pick. You need more proof that simply having draft picks doesn't really equate to drafting all NBA level talent. Look at the Suns draft that year. But since then, seeing as there's 14 lottery picks per draft, there have been 126 lottery picks since 2016. So I ask you this, Jamsters. Let's do some trivia.
You know what time it is.
Trivia time.
Out of those 126 lottery picks since 2016, how many of those players have gone on to be all NBA players? So in the past 9 years, 126 players have been drafted in the lottery. How many have become all NBA players? 11. Just 11. Let that sink in. And since 2021, not a single player from those drafts has made an all-NBA team. Now, granted, like Wemby, he's going to end up being one. Chet Holmgren most likely is going to end up being one. Paulo Banchero is most likely going to end up being one. But of those 11 players, 6 of them were a top 3 pick, and every guy I just named was a top 3 pick. So even if you have a ton of draft capital, the few who've transcended to become all NBA players, it's the exception, not the rule. The rest, the track record is a cruel reminder that hitting on top-tier talent in the draft is more elusive than many care to admit. Having draft picks doesn't equate to success. So let's say you blow it all up. In return, you haul a wheelbarrow full of draft picks. You once again have potential, promise, and the whispers of a brighter future. But potential takes time to bloom. Developing young talent means enduring the growing pains, the setbacks, and the uncertainty of whether the promise will ever translate into production. Blowing it up doesn't just reset your roster. It stretches your timeline. That dreaded word. Timeline. I'm having flashbacks of gray sleeves and too many point guards. Remember the timeline? There's a whole podcast named after it. It serves as a sobering reminder of how grueling the path of team building through the draft truly is. Now, people point to Oklahoma City as proof that it works, but they are the exception, not the rule. Our own history just a decade ago is littered with lottery picks that never turned into one franchise cornerstone except Devin Booker. The road is long, and the outcome is never guaranteed. Blowing it up just means accepting that this team won't be relevant for at least the next 8 years. Just look at the Philadelphia 76ers, right? They went all in on the process, tanking season after season to stockpile lottery picks. They started in 2013, and 12 years later, they still haven't even made an Eastern Conference Finals. You could argue that the real goal isn't just stockpiling draft picks for the sake of development, right? It's amassing the kind of trade capital that lets you go after elite talent. Sounds a lot like the path the Suns took, doesn't it? In this equation, draft picks aren't the meal, they're the seasoning, the salt and pepper that elevate a transaction. You don't hoard them, you use them to acquire proven stars, the kind that shift a franchise's fortunes. You know, kind of like Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Another reason I'm not a big fan of blowing it up is 4 quarters don't equal $1 in the NBA. NBA math just operates differently. More often than not, when you trade the most talented player in a deal for a collection of assets, you're the team that loses the trade. If you feel like you have more money simply because you have 4 quarters in your hand instead of $1, you're wrong. But that philosophy starts a chain reaction of taking one of those quarters and then you trade it for 2 dimes and a nickel. And then you take that nickel and you trade it for 5 pennies. The next thing you know, you're just stuck with a pocket full of change. It's like, just give me the dollar. And I know what you're thinking. Look at Kevin Durant. Look at Bradley Beal. You're saying under your breath. Look what they've done. This team went all in on big names, yet the success hasn't followed. And I get that. I understand it. But flip the perspective a moment. Look at the other side of those transactions. What did those teams actually gain? A handful of picks, a few solid role players, and hope. Nothing close to a guaranteed star. The reality is, in the NBA, talent wins, and true superstars are the rarest currency. The Brooklyn Nets turned Kevin Durant into Mikal Bridges, who they later flipped for 7 draft picks and additional players, Jay Crowder, who became 5 second-round draft picks, Cameron Johnson, and 5 first-rounders from Phoenix, right? 4 first-rounders and a pick swap. That was in February of 2023. Fast forward just 2 seasons, and despite stockpiling more draft capital than the basketball gods have themselves, the Nets sit at 25-51. Sure, they received a massive haul for Durant. And let's not forget, they got Kyrie Irving stuff too. They got a couple players and 3 picks for that. But they're no closer to contention today than they were when they had him. And then you look at the Washington Wizards. In exchange for Bradley Beal, they received Chris Paul, who they flipped for Jordan Poole, Patrick Baldwin Jr., Ryan Rollins, 2 picks in cash, along with Landry Shamet and a pile of Suns draft capital, 2nd-round picks, 1st-round pick swaps. Now, I'm not here to defend the Suns side of that deal. That was a reckless overpay. But let's focus on the Wizards. 2 years later, they're 17-59, no closer to relevance than they were with Beal. Both teams have a ton of draft capital, and it'll take years to see who they ultimately become. And that's part of my argument. It'll take years. Asset accumulation only matters if it translates into winning basketball. And so far, Brooklyn and Washington are just another cautionary tale that blowing it up doesn't guarantee progress. Stockpiling picks and young players sounds great in theory, but without a clear pathway to turning those assets into elite talent, it becomes an endless cycle of waiting, hoping, and praying that one of those lottery tickets cashes in. The harsh reality, most don't. Is it unfortunate how things have unfolded in Phoenix? Absolutely. No one could have predicted this. But if the takeaway is that the Suns should trade away star talent in exchange for mid-level players and draft capital, history has made one thing clear. That strategy rarely works. Time and again, teams that choose the tear-down route find themselves stuck in an endless rebuild, hoping their assets eventually turn into something meaningful, and more often than not, they don't. And I know you'll point to Oklahoma City, who traded away Paul George and Russell Westbrook for a treasure trove of draft capital and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander back in 2019. To their credit, Sam Presti has been exceptional as a general manager of that team with a unique vision. And who could have predicted SGA would evolve into an MVP candidate? A solid player, sure, but not the level he's reached. This, once again, is the exception, not the rule. The Thunder's success story is rare, and it should not be mistaken as the blueprint for every team looking to rebuild. We don't have to look too far to see the consequences of sending out the best player in a deal, do we? Just look at the time the Suns traded DA. What did we get in return? Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, who we ended up stretching and waiving, Keon Johnson, who we just waived, Yusuf Nurkic, who we had to attach a first-round pick just to move off of, end up with Cody Martin and Vasa Micic. Here's a nickel. Can I get 5 pennies, please? 4 quarters don't equal $1. Sending out a superstar like Devin Booker or Kevin Durant doesn't mean we're going to get 8 quarters for $2. Sure, the assets might look like more value on paper, but I'd rather hold on to the actual dollar bills than get flooded with a handful of shiny quarters. Now, as both of the examples I just mentioned below or previously show, blowing up just isn't a move. It's a long-term commitment. It requires time, patience, and the perfect execution of countless subsequent moves. Sure, you'll bring in some solid players to help. You might even get lucky and find someone with the potential to become an all-NBA talent. But again, that means you have to have a top 3 pick just to get there. Maybe hit on a draft pick, although history says, you're not. But there's so much more that needs to happen after trading away stars like Durant and Booker. There are countless transactions that need to be made, each one pivotal in rebuilding a team into something elite. The team could become competitive again. They might even land back in the playoff picture, maybe as high as a 60 in the Western Conference one day. But unless the recipe is executed flawlessly, every ingredient is measured to perfection, the result will be nothing more than a messy cake. Plenty of pieces, but nothing comes together the way it should. Watching the Phoenix Suns lose to the Milwaukee Bucks on Tuesday took me back to where we used to be, right? Devin Booker and a group of guys who fought tooth and nail every game, playing their asses off. It was entertaining because we saw heart, and it was promising because they played with relentless hustle. But in the end, they still lost by 10, just like the good old days. Why? Because Devin Booker had no consistent offensive help. He was the one carrying the scoring burden, and while he could take a lot, he couldn't do it alone. Over and over, we saw him shoulder the load back in the day, only for the team to fall short, season after season. It wore him down, and we watched that exhaustion set in. It's a tough reminder that heart and hustle aren't enough without the right support around you. This team started finding success when help was finally provided to Devin Booker. And unfortunately, the organization has since fumbled that opportunity. There's been a tendency to let excitement and emotion cloud the vision for how to build effectively around Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Now, who knows what's going to happen this offseason? Maybe trading Durant becomes the right move. Or maybe there's a chance to convince Beal to move on. But no matter which way they go, blowing it up, it's not the answer. A soft rebuild, sure. But starting from scratch and re-entering that never-ending timeline just to hope for another star like Booker or Durant, that's a dead end. The focus should be on finding the right pieces to complement your existing stars, not chasing the same cycle. 2 elite scorers are essential to compete at the highest level. That's why teams are interested in Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Look at the Houston Rockets, for example. They've got one great scorer in Jalen Green, but the rest of the roster is filled with inconsistent scoring options. They've got good defense, they've got athleticism, they've got youth, but they don't have consistent scoring. Consistency is key, and the Suns have that with Booker and Durant. The real issue, they went too far trying to stack the deck. The Beal acquisition was the overreach. They spent $50 million on a player who doesn't stay healthy and, when he does play, doesn't bring a unique skill set to the table. He's just duplicating what Booker and Durant already do. That money could have been better spent on players who complement Booker and Durant, not replicate them. As we navigate this long and winding road, we must remember that acquiring Kevin Durant was the first domino to fall. It required sacrificing things that we once valued deeply and still do. youth, chemistry, connectivity. But it was the acquisition of Beal that truly sealed the Suns' fate. With Beal, you could have explored acquiring other players with youth, guys who brought chemistry and connectivity to the table. But instead, they went with Beal. In doing so, they took a shortcut that, in the end, didn't bring the necessary pieces to build something sustainable and cohesive around Booker and Durant. And it's a misstep that's now holding them back. Don't blow it up, though. Don't press reset. Patience may be a virtue, but I don't have the time or the desire to embark on a decade-long self-exploratory exercise where we endlessly search for unique ways to acquire elite talent. The clock is ticking, and the window for a competitive team is short. So that's why I think this team should not blow it up. But what about the other side of the coin? What about actually blowing it up? Let's dive into the concept of a complete rebuild. Specifically, what the benefits and risk would be of trading away key assets like Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Now, I'll start with a complete unknown, and this isn't a nod to Timothy Chalamet or Bob Dylan, right? A complete unknown. The truth is we have no idea what's going to happen with Bradley Beal this offseason. He is a wild card, a variable that holds significant weight in how the blow-it-up strategy plays out. If the Suns can afford to offload his contract, they probably are not going to get a lot in return. Not in terms of valuable assets, at least. In fact, if you're in the blow-it-up camp, it might take getting rid of both Devin Booker and Kevin Durant and then leveraging the draft picks that they've accumulated to eventually rid themselves of Beal's cumbersome deal. But as the Suns explore unloading Beal, the reality is clear. Again, if you're in the blow-it-up camp, Durant and Booker are the most valuable assets in this organization. And if the team is stuck with Beal, who's aging and frequently injured, it's a painful but undeniable truth. You're looking at a rebuild with a flawed roster. It's the kind of situation that forces you to reckon with where your team stands, no matter how uncomfortable that truth may be. If the Suns blow it up, part of that painful equation could mean moving off of Devin Booker, a lifer in Phoenix, a decade spent in the desert. Such a decision would be the most heartbreaking kind of farewell, right? It's as if the organization becomes Robin Williams and Booker is Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, and they're both just standing there in the dimming light of what could have been. They embrace, and the words that Matt Ishbia, it tries to soften the blow. It's not your fault. It's not your fault, Devin. It's not your fault. He's like, I know. No, it's not your fault. I know. And then, like Will, Booker will drive away in his new car off to see about a girl, or in this case, a new chapter elsewhere. It would be a tragic, bittersweet ending. But the truth is, it's not Book's fault. The blame would fall squarely on the organization for putting itself in a position where trading Booker even becomes a consideration. Yet, as difficult as it is to admit, facing the reality of the situation is the first step toward any kind of resolution. The Suns have a problem. They have a problem in how they've built this roster, how they've recklessly spent both money and assets in an all-out sprint for a championship that now seems farther away than ever. They took a shortcut, hoping to speed through the hard work of building a championship contender. I'm not upset that they took swings. I'm upset that they swung for the fences and missed entirely. A bunt here, a double there. They could have been driving in runs instead of striking out. But now, as the time comes to face the music, the Suns must own their mistakes. It's their fault. And where they stand, somber and resigned, to send Booker off, we'll all sigh. It's the cost of trying to rebuild a franchise that desperately needs it, even at the heartbreak of a beloved player's departure. But why would you blow it up? Well, first thing, you're trying to maximize your return. The postseason's around the corner, and it's going to inevitably expose certain teams, revealing where they stand in a chase for a championship. For some, they'll realize they're just one Devin Booker or Kevin Durant away from achieving their ultimate goal. Like take the Houston Rockets, for example. If they're eliminated in the first round, they may come to the conclusion that they're not far off. And even if they make it to like Game 7 of the second round and lose, that sense of being on the cusp could still ring true. There's a wealth of young, talented teams with plenty of assets, but only one team raises the trophy at the end of the year. Some of these teams, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, are brimming with those young, athletic, gritty players. But soon, they're going to be faced with a difficult reality. The day of reckoning is coming. These players will need to be paid, and that could end up forcing them into some tough decisions. So why not trade a couple of those assets away, pay Kevin Durant for a shorter term, maybe just 2 years instead of 4 or 5 year extensions that they'd have to owe their own players, and go all in? It's the approach the Suns attempted to take, and for better or worse, the blueprint is there. Now the clock is ticking, and the Suns might be able to capitalize on the shifting landscape just as other teams will soon have to face their own challenging decisions. You're not going to maximize your return on Kevin Durant this offseason relative at least to what we paid for him. Whatever we get for Kevin Durant, it's going to be dwarfed by what we gave up for him. But the market for Durant is real, and already with rumors of several teams being interested, when multiple suitors are involved, the bidding war drives up the price. Add Devin Booker's name to the conversation, and suddenly the Suns have the potential to command a historic haul. Okay, not as historic as when the Nets pulled off the trades for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, but still, it's a deal that could set the franchise on a new, potentially sustainable path. This could be the summer where teams on the cusp of contention are willing to overpay to push themselves over the top. These teams know the window is small and that they need a final piece to make a run. So instead of holding on to assets that may never quite bring the Suns a championship as presently constructed, now's at least the time to listen. Don't get in the way of teams who are desperate to break through. The Suns could leverage this urgency to their advantage and secure the type of assets that could reshape the franchise for years to come. So that's maximizing what you could get back. And it's also, if you blow it up right now, you're minimizing your loss. Let's say you don't blow it up. Let's say you bring back both Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. And yes, Bradley Beal's still here too. You sign Durant to a 2-year extension and decide to give it another go. Maybe you have a new GM, maybe it's a new head coach again, or maybe you just believe that this team can somehow get better despite aging. There's hope that with the right adjustments, the Suns could make a run in the next couple of years. But honestly, time waits for no one. In a couple of years, that window's going to close. Kevin Durant's going to be nearing 40, and while I believe his jumper could allow him to play into his mid-40s, I'm not sure his body, specifically his ankles, will allow him to keep going at that elite level. When that time comes and Durant is coming off your books, you might find that you've got nothing in return from one of the most transcendent players of his generation. You're faced with a tough decision. Do you take the risk and ride it out for a chance for one last hoorah? Or do you face the inevitable and start to plan for the future before the clock runs out on a team that was never quite able to pull it all together? The Suns need to ask themselves if the risk of holding on to these assets is worth the potential fallout when that window finally closes. Then there's the Devin Booker decision, a dilemma that you're essentially punting down the driveway if you choose to keep him this offseason, hoping that it'll all make more sense when his contract is up in 2028. But at the end of next year, you're going to have the opportunity to pay him over $70 million, another extension. And when that day finally comes, who will the Suns be by then? Will they be the team that we wished would have acted sooner? Will they regret the missed opportunity to reset when they had the chance? If you hold on to Booker and the aging core around him, you risk being stuck in a no man's land of dwindling assets. And by the time 2028 rolls around, you won't have a stable of draft picks to fuel a rebuild. Kevin Durant will be off the books. Beal will be off the books. And you'll have a ton of cap space. But you're not going to have the ability to trade for anything because you're not going to have any assets to trade. You'll be left with a roster of aging talent with no clear direction forward. That's the inherent risk of not blowing it up now. The clock is ticking, and every day that passes without a hard reset might be another step towards a future that's as frustrating as the present. It's a tough decision, but the question remains, do you stick with what you do? Do you stick with what you know, or do you take the hard step to ensure the Suns' future is brighter than it looks today? because not acting now could very well mean missing the opportunity to truly rebuild for the future. Now, another thing is you still have Matt Ishbia. And I know a lot of fans are frustrated with the state of the Suns right now, and many are quick to point their fingers at Matt Ishbia. And as I've mentioned before, he came in with the mentality of trying to hit home runs, swinging for the fences with hopes of building a championship contender, and unfortunately he missed. But it's important to remember that his aggressive approach comes from a place of wanting to spend, of wanting to be competitive and wanting to win. He's the kind of person who believes in taking chances even if they don't always pay off. Has it worked in his favor so far? Clearly no. But that doesn't mean it can't work in the future if the team embraces the idea of blowing it up and resetting their direction. Matt's willingness to take risks, and it can still pay dividends, but only if the front office learns from past mistakes and recalibrates for a future that prioritizes long-term success over short-term fixes. While the current situation isn't ideal, I still believe a path forward can ultimately benefit the Suns. And I think that it requires bold decisions. And those decisions may mean starting over, not just trying to patch things together. As a part of the blow-up, the Suns will likely get quality players in return. They may not be all-NBA caliber talent, but they'll bring in pieces that can keep the team competitive, at least in the short term. More importantly, you'll be shedding apron restrictions, which is crucial for regaining financial flexibility. Phoenix, which is still seen as a desirable free agent destination, can use this newfound cap space to pursue players who fit the vision of a general manager with a clear roadmap for the future. We just need to get that general manager. The Suns have always shown they're willing to spend and take chances in the pursuit of greatness. The key now is ensuring that those decisions are guided by a long-term strategy, one that's more about building sustainability than chasing quick fixes. That's what a blow-up gives you. This approach could set the team up not just for the next few seasons, but for years to come. By blowing it up, the Suns could accumulate draft picks, add mid-level players, and leverage free agency as a foundation for the rebuild. And with a stockpile of draft picks in hand, they would gain the flexibility to be more discerning, applying the lessons learned from past mistakes. And over time, this newfound wisdom could guide them to make more strategic moves in the trade market, gradually improving the team and position themselves for future success. This approach could lay the groundwork for a more sustainable, competitive franchise down the line. And yeah, down the line. This is the one that takes time. Now, I've mentioned before that Oklahoma City is the exception, not the rule, and I stand by that. What they've accomplished is a model that will be studied for years to come. There's, however, they've had a blend of luck, impeccable scouting, masterful roster construction, and a clear executed vision. Now, while their success should certainly be admired, we must also recognize that they are not the only team who successfully navigated this path. The blueprint that they followed isn't unique, and there are other organizations that have found a way to rebuild with similar foresight and strategy. The key is having the right elements align: talent, timing, and the ability to adapt as the landscape shifts. If you're willing to invest the time, it can absolutely happen. Just look at the Boston Celtics. They were nearing the end of the Big Three era with Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. They decided to blow it up, acquire a treasure trove of draft capital and mid-level players, and rebuilt through the draft. Now, they're a perennial force in the Eastern Conference with a championship to show for it. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they followed a similar blueprint. After the departure of LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, they did what many would consider a rebuild done right. While they didn't get consecutive third overall picks like the Celtics did, which resulted in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, their strategy was clear: build with vision. They drafted key players like Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, and Isaac Okoro. Granted, they hit on their third, fifth, and fifth overall picks because that's what those guys were. And, that's tough. But then they complemented them with trade acquisitions like Jared Allen and then took a big swing for Donovan Mitchell. Their focus on youth, athleticism, and defense has turned them into a formidable force in the Eastern Conference. Both examples prove that with the right vision, dedication, and a bit of patience, a rebuild can lead to sustainable success. The path is there, but it requires the right combination of timing, scouting, and strategic decision-making. So it is doable. But patience is a virtue, a quality I've expressed before. At this point, I'm not sure I'm willing to invest in that patience. However, I can still understand and appreciate the value it brings. A rebuild takes time, and the process isn't always glamorous in the moment. But with the right strategy and steady focus, it can eventually pay off. It's just a matter of whether the Suns are ready to take that long view or if the urgency to win now outweighs the patience needed for sustainable growth. So there you go. I've laid out a point counterpoint with myself, explaining why I believe a blow up could be the path forward with its benefits and why keeping the core intact could also have merits. In the end, it all comes down to taking the emotion out of the equation and evaluating the Suns situation through a lens of logic. Both paths come with risks and rewards, but the key is having a clear vision of where the team wants to go and a plan to get there. So good old point counterpoint. All right. Let's see what the chat's saying. Stu says, John, what player would you need back from Houston for KD? I like that you said need back because people say, who do you think would come back? And I couldn't tell you that. I couldn't tell you what Houston's thinking. But I like that you said, what player would you need back? What would I need back? What would I want? I want Amen Thompson. If we're going to get rid of Kevin Durant, give me Amen Thompson. You know, what's the one I keep seeing him? Eason and a couple first rounders. I would love to have Amen Thompson on this team. I absolutely adore that kid. I think he's absolutely fantastic. Eat Crab, how do you acquire talent now? It's a great question. It's tough. If we go into next season, now again, the perfect world for me is you get off of Bradley Beal's contract. And I know I personally kind of have that agenda. The things that I write on Bright Side of the Sun are not positive about Bradley Beal because I don't want him here. I think that he's ruined this whole era. But if you can get off of him, you now have $50 million to play with. And you really only have like $20 million, right? Because $30 million of his $57 million is just going to simply get you out of the second apron. Because this team right now is $26 million over the second apron. You need to get out of that. So you get a $20 million player. I'd have to look who's available in free agency and then, you know, see if there's trades available. We know we're probably not going to extend or bring back Vasamicic. And we're the same with Cody Martin. And those two spots could potentially be filled by the draft picks that this team's going to draft in the upcoming draft. So if you take that approach and you go, okay, we're going to have rookie contracts for our 30th overall pick and the 55th overall pick. So we have a little bit of a youth movement. We have those two guys. We have Oso Igatoro. We have Ryan Dunn. And then you go and you find the best free agent for $20 million, preferably somebody who has defense. You know, a true 3-and-D wing is what this team needs, a true 3-and-D wing. I think that Tyus Jones is gone. I think Colin Gillespie stays. I don't know if you start him next year, but you definitely explore potentially starting him. Maybe bring back Monte Morris, and it's Monte Morris and Colin Gillespie that help this team from a starting point guard standpoint. I mean, think back to those big three teams back when you were allowed to have big three teams. Who was the starting point guard for all those Miami Heat teams? Does anyone remember? The ones that had LeBron James and Chris Bosh and Ray Allen and Dwayne Wade. It was Mario Chalmers from Kansas. So you don't need an amazing point guard. You don't need Chris Paul out there. You need somebody who's gritty and who can play some defense. All right? Monte Morris can't play a ton of defense, but Colin Gillespie plays with disruption. He's proven something to me. I think he has for a lot of Suns fans out there. But you see what the market has. And then you go from there. Let's see. I'm going to look through a few more comments before I go ahead and get out of here. Again, thanks for hanging out with me. I read I read those to you. The first part, the first point of not blowing it up is a piece that's currently published on brightsideofthesun.com. You can go and you can read it there. And then the second one is going to be published first thing tomorrow morning, when that's the one where it's saying the Suns should stop chasing quick fixes and embrace a full rebuild. They should blow it up. That's going to be published tomorrow morning on Bright Side of the Sun. So I just wanted to, I thought, I put a lot of time, thought, and effort. I've been piecing both of those pieces together for quite some time now. sitting down, writing a little bit here, writing a little bit there, constructing thoughts, thinking, hearing what other people are saying to construct my thoughts, and I want to give a full, point counterpoint so people can weigh the options and then, kind of where they're at. Identify where they're at and how they want this organization to move forward, and then have talking points. So next time you're sitting around a bar, it's like, well, here's why you blow it up. Okay. You're maximizing your return. You're minimizing your loss. And Matt Ishby is still there and he's still going to try. King Nacho, our anti-Beal guys in the chat, says can't trade him, can't stretch him, can't buy him out without it still counting against the cap. That's all correct. But maybe you can just get rid of him. Maybe you can talk to him. Maybe the time will be right this summer. It's not the middle of a school year. Maybe Beal is feeling it. And worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, he's on the books for 2 more years. And in 2 years, we can be happy again. But see that? But to see that? Like, see what you're feeling when I say that, everybody? Yeah, in 2 years, he's off the books, and then we can be happy again. And then you go, fuck, man, 2 years? That's why I'm not a fan of the complete blow up. Because you're saying 8 years from now, we're going to be good. We went through the blow up a decade ago. Was not a fan of how that traded or that played out. Saul in the chat, John, would you be okay with bringing in Kawhi if Beal would go to LA? All stars love LA. Let me look at the Kawhi contract. Not necessarily. I mean, yes, because no matter what, the answer would be yes right off the bat, because Kawhi doesn't have a no trade clause in his contract. That's the killer to me. The complete lack of flexibility. So yeah, Kawhi comes off the books in 2 years as well. He's paid less than Bradley Beal. He gets paid $49 million this year, $50 million next year, and $50.3 in his final year before he becomes an unrestricted free agent. So yeah, if we could pull off a trade, send Beal to the Clippers, and we got Kawhi Leonard, that's a win for the Suns. Is he going to play a lot? No. But at least you have flexibility. At least he's a name. Maybe you can get off that contract eventually too. All right, Jamsters. Well, I appreciate you hanging out with me tonight. We'll be coming to you live tomorrow after the Suns lose to the Boston Celtics. So make sure you tune in then, as per usual. Again, my name is John Voida. You can read my writing at brightsideofthesun.com, and you can find me right here, normally with Matthew Lissy, on the Suns Jam Session podcast. So until I see you tomorrow night, go home and love your family.
Hey, you're listening to the Suns Jam Session podcast, shooting the shit about the Suns since 2019.